Question 1. The control framework reveals that Regal Rexnord has implemented a new inventory management system. To assess the effectiveness of internal controls over financial reporting related to this system, which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory requirements for publicly traded companies in the United States? Option A. Relying on informal discussions with IT personnel and warehouse staff to gauge their understanding of the new system's security features. Option B. Reviewing documentation and performing walkthroughs to understand the design of the new system's controls, and then testing the operating effectiveness of those controls. Option C. Prioritizing the rapid deployment of the new system and deferring detailed control testing until a later, unspecified date. Option D. Examining the previous year's audit report for any related control deficiencies, and assuming the new system addresses them. Correct answer is B. Reviewing documentation and performing walkthroughs to understand the design of the new system's controls, and then testing the operating effectiveness of those controls. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Regal Rexnord, as a publicly traded company, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight regarding its financial reporting and internal controls. The challenge lies in accurately identifying and applying the relevant regulatory framework to ensure compliance and prevent misstatements. A failure to do so can lead to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, SOX, specifically Section 404, which mandates that management and the external auditor report on the adequacy of the company's internal control over financial reporting. This requires a systematic evaluation of the design and operating effectiveness of internal controls. The regulatory justification stems directly from SOX 404 requirement for management to establish and maintain adequate internal control structures and procedures for financial reporting, and for the auditor to attest to the effectiveness of these controls. Adhering to this framework ensures that financial statements are reliable and that the company is operating with integrity. An incorrect approach that relies solely on anecdotal evidence or informal discussions with colleagues fails to meet the SOX requirements for documented and tested internal controls. This approach lacks the rigor and objectivity mandated by the regulation, leading to a high risk of control deficiencies going undetected. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on past audit findings without considering current operational changes overlooks the dynamic nature of business processes and the potential for new or evolving risks. SOX requires ongoing assessment and adaptation of controls. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by implementing controls without proper design assessment or testing would be a significant regulatory failure. It would not provide reasonable assurance of the effectiveness of internal controls, violating the spirit and letter of SOX. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the applicable regulatory landscape, in this case, U.S. federal securities laws and SOX. This is followed by a detailed understanding of the specific requirements within that framework, such as SOX 404. Next, professionals must gather objective evidence through systematic evaluation and testing of controls. Finally, they should document their findings and conclusions in a manner that is auditable and defensible, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 2. Investigation of a potential misstatement in Regal Rexnord's financial reporting has been initiated by an internal whistleblower. The whistleblower alleges that certain revenue recognition practices may not fully comply with the applicable accounting standards. The finance department is under pressure to meet aggressive quarterly earnings targets. Option A. Instruct the finance department to review the revenue recognition practices to ensure they align with company policy, but defer a formal investigation until after the current quarter's earnings are reported. Option B. Immediately initiate a comprehensive, independent internal investigation into the whistleblower's allegations, ensuring all relevant documentation is preserved and that no retaliatory actions are taken against the whistleblower. Option C. Dismiss the whistleblower's concerns as a misunderstanding, citing the finance department's strong track record in meeting financial targets. Option D. Conduct a quick review of the most recent transactions to confirm that revenue targets are being met, and if so, consider the matter closed. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a comprehensive, independent internal investigation into the whistleblower's allegations, ensuring all relevant documentation is preserved and that no retaliatory actions are taken against the whistleblower. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet quarterly targets can create an environment where shortcuts are considered, but adhering to ethical principles and regulatory frameworks is paramount for maintaining trust, reputation, and legal standing. Careful judgment is required to navigate the conflict between short-term gains and long-term integrity. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparency and adherence to all applicable regulations. This means thoroughly investigating the reported issue, gathering all relevant facts without bias, and ensuring that any necessary corrective actions are taken in accordance with Regal Rexnord's internal policies and relevant legal statutes. This approach upholds ethical standards by prioritizing accuracy and compliance over expediency, thereby protecting the company from potential legal repercussions and reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the concerns without a proper investigation, especially if there is pressure to avoid negative financial reporting. This failure to investigate could lead to continued non-compliance, potentially resulting in significant fines, legal action, and severe damage to Regal Rexnord's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial investigation that only addresses the immediate symptom rather than the root cause. This would not only fail to rectify the underlying problem, but could also be seen as an attempt to circumvent regulatory scrutiny, leading to further ethical and legal complications. Finally, attempting to conceal or downplay the findings to protect short-term financial results would be a direct violation of ethical principles and likely regulatory requirements, exposing Regal Rexnord to severe penalties. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves a systematic process of identifying the issue, gathering information from all relevant sources, consulting internal policies and external regulations, assessing potential risks and consequences of different actions, and making a decision that aligns with the highest ethical standards and legal requirements. Open communication and a willingness to address problems proactively are crucial elements of this framework. Question 3. Strategic planning requires Regal Rexnord to effectively integrate a newly acquired company. Which of the following approaches best ensures that this integration process is conducted in full compliance with United States regulatory frameworks and ethical business practices? Option A. Prioritize immediate operational synergy and cost savings, deferring detailed compliance integration until after the initial operational consolidation is complete. Option B. Focus primarily on the financial projections and revenue enhancement opportunities presented by the acquisition, with compliance being a secondary consideration. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the acquisition on Regal Rexnord's existing compliance programs and internal controls, identifying potential regulatory gaps and developing mitigation strategies. Option D. Adopt the acquired company's existing compliance framework and procedures without extensive review, assuming they meet current regulatory standards. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the acquisition on Regal Rexnord's existing compliance programs and internal controls, identifying potential regulatory gaps and developing mitigation strategies. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Regal Rexnord's leadership team as they navigate the complexities of integrating a newly acquired entity. The challenge lies in ensuring that the integration process not only achieves strategic objectives, but also adheres strictly to the regulatory framework governing business operations and financial reporting within the United States. Failure to do so could result in significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. Careful judgment is required to balance the speed of integration with the imperative of compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough impact assessment of the acquisition on Regal Rexnord's existing compliance programs and internal controls. This assessment should identify any gaps or inconsistencies between the acquired company's practices and Regal Rexnord's established standards, as well as relevant U.S. regulations. By systematically evaluating potential impacts on areas such as financial reporting, e.g., GOP compliance, Sarbanes-Oxley Act requirements, data privacy, e.g., CCPA, environmental regulations and labor laws, Regal Rexnord can proactively develop mitigation strategies. This approach aligns with the principles of robust corporate governance and risk management, ensuring that the integration is conducted in a legally sound and ethically responsible manner, thereby safeguarding the company's integrity and operational continuity. Incorrect approach is analysis. Prioritizing immediate operational synergy without a comprehensive compliance review is an incorrect approach. This oversight risks embedding non-compliant practices from the acquired entity into Regal Rexnord's operations, potentially leading to violations of U.S. federal and state laws. Such violations can result in fines, lawsuits, and reputational harm. Focusing solely on the financial benefits of the acquisition while deferring compliance integration is also an incorrect approach. This neglects the fundamental legal obligations of Regal Rexnord as a publicly traded entity, assuming it is, and its responsibility to operate within the bounds of U.S. law. Delaying compliance can create a more complex and costly remediation process later. Adopting the acquired company's existing compliance framework without rigorous evaluation is another incorrect approach. This assumes that the acquired company's practices are adequate and compliant with all applicable U.S. regulations, which is often not the case. It bypasses the necessary due diligence to ensure alignment with Regal Rexnord's own standards and the broader regulatory landscape. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Regal Rexnord should adopt a structured, risk-based approach to post-acquisition integration. This involves 1. Establishing a dedicated integration team with representatives from legal, compliance, finance, and operations. 2. Conducting a comprehensive due diligence on the acquired entity's compliance posture, identifying all relevant U.S. federal, state, and local regulations. 3. Performing a detailed impact assessment to understand how the acquisition affects existing policies, procedures, and internal controls. 4. Developing a phased integration plan that prioritizes critical compliance areas and establishes clear timelines for remediation. 5. Implementing robust monitoring and reporting mechanisms to track progress and ensure ongoing adherence to regulatory requirements. This systematic process ensures that strategic goals are pursued responsibly, with a strong foundation of legal and ethical compliance. Question 4. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the proposed integration of advanced automation technologies at Regal Rexnord's manufacturing facilities may significantly alter existing job roles and potentially lead to workforce displacement. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical best practices for managing this transition? Option A. Prioritize immediate implementation of automation to realize cost efficiencies, addressing employee concerns on an ad hoc basis as they arise. Option B. Delay the formal impact assessment until after the automation is fully operational to avoid disrupting the implementation timeline. Option C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify affected roles, quantify potential displacement, and develop proactive mitigation strategies such as retraining and redeployment programs. Option D. Focus the assessment solely on the technical feasibility of the automation, with minimal consideration for its human resource implications. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify affected roles, quantify potential displacement, and develop proactive mitigation strategies such as retraining and redeployment programs. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Regal Rexnord to balance the immediate need for operational efficiency with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. The pressure to quickly implement changes that could impact employee roles necessitates a thorough and compliant approach to avoid potential legal repercussions, reputational damage, and employee dissatisfaction. The core challenge lies in ensuring that any impact assessment is conducted with integrity, transparency, and adherence to relevant employment laws and ethical guidelines. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that meticulously analyzes the potential effects of the proposed automation on the workforce. This includes identifying roles likely to be affected, quantifying the scale of the impact, and developing proactive strategies for mitigation, such as retraining, redeployment, or severance packages. This approach is ethically sound and professionally responsible because it prioritizes the well-being of employees while acknowledging the business imperative for modernization. It aligns with principles of fair labor practices and demonstrates a commitment to responsible corporate citizenship, which is often implicitly or explicitly supported by regulatory frameworks governing employment and corporate conduct. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost savings of automation without adequately assessing the human impact would be professionally unacceptable. This failure would likely violate employment laws that mandate consultation with employees or their representatives regarding significant operational changes and could lead to claims of unfair dismissal or discrimination. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying or omitting the impact assessment to expedite implementation, would also be ethically and legally flawed. This bypasses crucial due diligence, potentially leading to unforeseen negative consequences for employees and the company, and could be seen as a deliberate attempt to circumvent regulatory requirements or ethical considerations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape and ethical expectations relevant to workforce changes. This involves proactively identifying potential impacts, engaging relevant stakeholders, including employees or their representatives, and developing a robust assessment methodology. The process should be iterative, allowing for adjustments based on findings and feedback, and should always prioritize compliance, fairness, and transparency. Question 5. When evaluating a financial report for Regal Rexnord, a senior colleague suggests making adjustments to accelerate the recognition of certain revenue streams to present a more favorable quarterly performance. You believe these adjustments would misrepresent the company's actual financial position and violate accounting principles. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proceed with the original, unaltered financial report without acknowledging or discussing the senior colleague's suggestion. Option B. Immediately report the senior colleague's suggestion to external regulatory authorities without any internal discussion or attempt at resolution. Option C. Politely refuse to make the suggested adjustments, explaining that they would misrepresent the company's financial position and violate accounting principles, and offer to discuss alternative, compliant methods for presenting performance. Option D. Make the suggested adjustments as requested by the senior colleague to ensure a positive quarterly report and avoid potential conflict. The correct answer is C. Politely refuse to make the suggested adjustments, explaining that they would misrepresent the company's financial position and violate accounting principles, and offer to discuss alternative compliant methods for presenting performance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing a direct request from a senior colleague with the ethical obligation to maintain the integrity of financial reporting and adhere to regulatory standards. The pressure to comply with a superior's directive, especially when it involves potentially misrepresenting financial data, can create a difficult ethical dilemma. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without compromising personal integrity or violating legal and professional responsibilities. The correct approach involves politely but firmly refusing to alter the financial report in a way that misrepresents the company's performance. This upholds the principle of professional skepticism and the duty to provide accurate and truthful financial information, as mandated by regulatory frameworks such as the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, rules, and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, SOX, in the United States. Specifically, SOX Section 302 requires the principal officers of a public company to certify the accuracy of financial reports. And Section 906 imposes criminal penalties for knowingly certifying false or misleading financial statements. Adhering to generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, is also a fundamental ethical and legal requirement. By refusing to manipulate the numbers, the employee demonstrates integrity and a commitment to compliance, thereby protecting both themselves and Regal Rexnord from potential legal repercussions and reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to comply with the senior colleague's request to artificially inflate revenue. This action directly violates the principles of accurate financial reporting and could be construed as fraudulent. It breaches the trust placed in financial professionals by investors, regulators, and the public. Such a decision would expose the employee to severe personal liability, including potential termination, civil penalties, and criminal prosecution under laws like SOX. Furthermore, it would damage Regal Rexnord's reputation and could lead to significant fines and sanctions from regulatory bodies. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the request and proceed with the original, unaltered report without any communication. While this avoids direct complicity and misrepresentation, it fails to address the ethical concern raised by the senior colleague's directive and misses an opportunity to educate or clarify the situation. It also leaves the senior colleague's potentially misguided request unaddressed, which could lead to further issues or misunderstandings down the line. A professional response requires engagement and clear communication. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately escalate the issue to external regulatory bodies without first attempting to resolve it internally or seeking clarification. While escalation is sometimes necessary, a premature escalation can be disruptive and may not be the most effective first step. A more professional approach often involves attempting to understand the colleague's perspective, explaining the regulatory and ethical constraints, and seeking guidance from internal compliance or legal departments if necessary, before involving external authorities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the ethical conflict and potential regulatory violations. 2. Understanding the relevant laws, regulation, and company policies. 3. Seeking clarification and expressing concerns respectfully but assertively. 4. Documenting all communications and decisions. 5. Escalating the issue through appropriate internal channels, e.g., supervisor, compliance officer, legal counsel, if the situation cannot be resolved at the initial level. 6. Prioritizing integrity and compliance above personal or professional pressure. Question 6. Market research demonstrates that a new competitor is gaining significant traction in a key market segment for Regal Rexnord. While initial findings suggest a potential decline in Regal Rexnord's market share, a junior analyst has identified a niche area where Regal Rexnord still holds a dominant position. The senior management team is eager to present a positive outlook to investors at the upcoming quarterly earnings call. Which of the following approaches best reflects ethical and professional conduct for Regal Rexnord in this situation? Option A. Conduct a thorough analysis of the overall market trends, including the competitor's rise and its impact on Regal Rexnord's broader market share, while also presenting the data on the niche area with appropriate context. Option B. Focus the market research presentation solely on the niche area where Regal Rexnord maintains dominance, highlighting this as evidence of continued strength and downplaying the broader market share concerns. Option C. Instruct the junior analyst to omit any mention of the competitor's gains and to only present data related to Regal Rexnord's established strengths. Option D. Commission a new round of market research specifically designed to find data that refutes the initial findings about the competitor's success and potential market share loss. The correct answer is B. Focus the market research presentation solely on the niche area where Regal Rexnord maintains dominance, highlighting this as evidence of continued strength and downplaying the broader market share concerns. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's desire for competitive advantage with the ethical obligation to maintain data integrity and avoid misleading stakeholders. The pressure to present favorable results, even if based on incomplete or potentially biased data, can create a conflict of interest. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any market research presented by Regal Rexnord is both accurate and ethically sound, adhering to principles of transparency and fairness. The correct approach involves a commitment to rigorous data collection and analysis, ensuring that all relevant factors are considered and that the research methodology is robust and unbiased. This approach upholds the ethical duty to present truthful and accurate information, which is fundamental to maintaining trust with investors, customers, and regulatory bodies. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of professional conduct that emphasize integrity, objectivity, and due diligence in all business dealings. By prioritizing accurate representation of market conditions, Regal Rexnord demonstrates a commitment to responsible corporate behavior and long-term sustainability, which is often implicitly or explicitly supported by general business ethics guidelines and the implied duty of good faith in corporate reporting. An incorrect approach that involves selectively presenting data to highlight positive trends while downplaying negative ones is ethically flawed. This practice can mislead stakeholders about the true state of the market and Regal Rexnord's performance, potentially leading to poor investment decisions or misinformed strategic planning. Such selective reporting violates the principle of transparency and can be seen as a form of misrepresentation. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss or ignore market research that presents unfavorable findings, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of objectivity and a failure to engage with critical feedback that could be vital for identifying areas of improvement or potential risks. It suggests a bias towards confirmation and a disregard for the comprehensive understanding of the market landscape. A third incorrect approach, which is to commission further research solely to find data that supports a predetermined conclusion, represents a manipulation of the research process. This undermines the integrity of market research and is a breach of ethical conduct, as it prioritizes desired outcomes over objective truth. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of ethical principles and a commitment to their application. Professionals should always strive for objectivity, accuracy, and transparency in their work. When faced with conflicting pressures, it is crucial to consult relevant ethical guidelines, seek advice from supervisors or ethics committees, and prioritize the long-term integrity of the company and its relationships over short-term gains. A robust process includes critically evaluating research methodologies, questioning assumptions, and ensuring that all findings, positive or negative, are presented in a balanced and truthful manner. Question 7. Analysis of a situation at Regal Rexnord where a significant, unannounced product innovation has been developed internally. This innovation is expected to materially impact the company's future revenue streams. A senior executive is considering sharing this information with a few key financial analysts to gauge their reaction and potentially influence analyst reports before a formal public announcement. What is the most appropriate course of action for Regal Rexnord to ensure compliance with securities regulations and maintain market integrity? Option A. Wait for the product to be fully launched and generating revenue before making any public disclosure about its development. Option B. Share the details of the product innovation with a select group of trusted financial analysts to gather preliminary feedback and prepare them for future coverage. Option C. Allow the senior executive to privately brief a few key investors on the innovation, emphasizing its potential impact, to secure their continued support. Option D. Immediately disseminate the information about the product innovation to all registered financial analysts and institutional investors simultaneously through a press release and SEC filing. Correct answer is D. Immediately disseminate the information about the product innovation to all registered financial analysts and institutional investors simultaneously through a press release and SEC filing. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Regal Rexnord, as a publicly traded company, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight regarding its financial reporting and disclosures. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need for timely and accurate information dissemination with the potential for market manipulation or insider trading. The company's internal control environment and its commitment to ethical conduct are paramount in navigating such situations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all stakeholders receive fair and equitable treatment, and that no party gains an unfair advantage through privileged information. The correct approach involves a structured, multi-departmental review process that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical considerations. This approach ensures that any material non-public information is handled with the utmost care, preventing premature disclosure that could impact market integrity. Specifically, the legal and compliance teams would assess the information's materiality and the appropriate disclosure timing according to SEC regulations, assuming U.S. jurisdiction for Regal Rexnord. This systematic review, involving cross-functional input, is designed to mitigate risks associated with selective disclosure and insider trading, thereby upholding Regal Rexnord's commitment to transparency and fair dealing. An incorrect approach would be to disclose the information directly to a select group of analysts or investors before a formal public announcement. This constitutes selective disclosure, a violation of Regulation FD, fair disclosure, under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. Regulation FD prohibits companies from selectively disclosing material non-public information to certain parties, such as securities analysts or institutional investors, without also disclosing that information to the public. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the disclosure indefinitely without a clear rationale or plan for public release, which could also raise concerns about transparency and potentially mislead the market. Furthermore, allowing individuals with access to this information to trade on it before public disclosure would constitute insider trading, a severe violation of securities laws. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature of the information, materiality, and non-public status. This should be followed by an immediate consultation with the legal and compliance departments to understand the applicable regulatory requirements and potential risks. A robust internal communication protocol should be established to ensure that all relevant parties are aware of the information's status and the restrictions on its use or disclosure. The decision-making process should always err on the side of caution, prioritizing public disclosure and regulatory compliance over any perceived short-term advantage of selective information sharing. Question 8. The audit findings indicate that an external auditor has requested direct access to certain raw transactional data from Regal, Rexnord's operational systems to perform a specific audit procedure. The request has been made directly to a junior analyst in the finance department, bypassing the usual channels for external auditor inquiries. What is the most appropriate course of action for the junior analyst to take? Option A. Politely inform the auditor that the request must be submitted through the designated audit liaison within Regal Rexnord's corporate office for proper processing and verification. Option B. Attempt to interpret the data and provide a summary based on their understanding to expedite the auditor's work. Option C. Refuse to provide any data, stating that direct access to operational systems is not permitted under any circumstances. Option D. Immediately provide the raw transactional data as requested to facilitate the audit process. The correct answer is D. Immediately provide the raw transactional data as requested to facilitate the audit process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for timely information with the obligation to maintain data integrity and adhere to internal control procedures at Regal Rexnord. The auditor's request, while seemingly straightforward, could bypass established protocols, potentially leading to misinterpretations or the use of incomplete data if not handled correctly. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance and accuracy. The correct approach involves escalating the request through the appropriate channels within Regal Rexnord. This ensures that the data provided is verified, contextualized, and shared according to established company policies and regulatory requirements. This method upholds the principle of due diligence and maintains the integrity of financial reporting and internal controls, which are paramount under U.S. GAAP and relevant SEC guidelines for publicly traded companies like Regal Rexnord. It also aligns with professional auditing standards that emphasize proper documentation and communication. An incorrect approach would be to directly provide the raw, unverified data to the auditor. This bypasses internal review processes, potentially leading to the auditor working with information that is not fully reconciled or understood within Regal Rexnord's operational context. This could result in inaccurate audit conclusions and, by extension, misrepresentations in financial statements, violating the principles of accuracy and transparency expected under U.S. financial regulations. Another incorrect approach is to refuse to provide any information without a clear, documented reason. Caution is necessary. Outright refusal without attempting to understand the request or guide the auditor to the correct internal process can be seen as uncooperative and may hinder the audit's progress, potentially creating unnecessary friction and delaying important oversight. A third incorrect approach is to provide a partial response based on assumptions. This is problematic because it introduces the risk of providing incomplete or misleading information, which can be as damaging as providing incorrect data. It fails to meet the standard of thoroughness and accuracy required in financial reporting and auditing. Professionals at Regal Rexnord should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to internal policies and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the request and its potential implications. 2. Consulting internal policies and procedures for handling such requests. 3. Escalating the request to the appropriate department or management for review and approval. 4. Ensuring that any information provided is accurate, complete, and properly contextualized. 5. Documenting all communications and actions taken. This structured approach ensures that decisions are defensible, compliant, and support the integrity of Regal Rexnord's operations and reporting. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that Regal Rexnord's sales team is preparing a proposal for a significant new client. During internal discussions, it becomes apparent that some of the proposed product features and delivery timelines may be ambitious and not fully supported by current engineering capabilities or operational capacity. The sales manager, eager to secure the contract, suggests that the team lean into the optimistic projections to make the proposal more attractive, implying that any discrepancies can be addressed later. What is the most ethical and professionally responsible course of action for the Regal Rexnord team? Option A. Immediately halt discussions on the proposal and conduct a thorough review with engineering and operations to ensure all claims are accurate and achievable before proceeding with any client communication. Option B. Present the proposal with the optimistic projections as discussed, with the understanding that the team will work diligently to meet them and address any issues post-contract award. Option C. Inform the client that some aspects of the proposal are aspirational and may require adjustments once a full technical assessment is completed post-contract. Option D. Proceed with the proposal as is, but include a disclaimer that all specifications and timelines are subject to change based on further technical review. The correct answer is B. Present the proposal with the optimistic projections as discussed, with the understanding that the team will work diligently to meet them and address any issues post-contract award. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a conflict between a company's desire to secure a new contract and the ethical obligation to ensure all representations made to potential clients are accurate and verifiable. Regal Rexnord's sales team is under pressure to close a deal, leading to a temptation to overstate capabilities. The challenge lies in balancing business objectives with integrity and compliance, especially when misrepresentations could have significant legal and reputational consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparency and factual accuracy. This means the sales team must verify all claims about Regal Rexnord's product capabilities and delivery timelines with the engineering and operations departments before presenting them to the potential client. This aligns with general principles of business ethics and regulatory expectations that prohibit deceptive trade practices. While specific U.S. regulations for this exact scenario aren't detailed in the prompt, the overarching principle of honesty in business dealings is universally expected and often codified in consumer protection laws and contract law, which require good faith representations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Misrepresenting product capabilities to secure the contract is ethically unsound and potentially illegal. It violates principles of fair dealing and could lead to breach of contract claims if Regal Rexnord fails to deliver as promised. This approach prioritizes short-term gain over long-term trust and compliance. Agreeing to unrealistic delivery timelines without consulting operations is also problematic. It creates a high probability of failing to meet contractual obligations, leading to penalties, reputational damage, and potential legal disputes. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the company's operational capacity. Focusing solely on the sales target without considering the veracity of the information provided to the client is a failure of professional responsibility. It suggests a culture where results are valued above ethical conduct and accurate representation, which can have severe repercussions for Regal Rexnord. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Regal Rexnord should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes integrity and compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the client's needs and requirements thoroughly. 2. Verifying all claims about product capabilities and delivery schedules with relevant internal departments, engineering, operations, legal. 3. Communicating honestly and transparently with the client, even if it means admitting limitations or proposing alternative solutions. 4. Documenting all representations made to the client. 5. Escalating any concerns about potential misrepresentations to management or compliance officers. This systematic approach ensures that business objectives are pursued ethically and within legal boundaries. Question 10. Research into the upcoming launch of a new innovative product by Regal Rexnord has revealed significant potential market disruption. What is the most appropriate approach for Regal Rexnord's leadership to take in assessing the full impact of this launch? Option A. Conduct a rapid, high-level assessment focusing primarily on projected revenue gains and immediate marketing opportunities. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates financial, operational, legal, and communication implications across all relevant business units and external stakeholders. Option C. Prioritize speed to market by proceeding with the launch based on initial positive market feedback, deferring detailed impact analysis until post-launch. Option D. Rely on informal discussions with key sales personnel and industry contacts to gauge the potential market reception and operational feasibility. The correct answer is A. Conduct a rapid, high-level assessment focusing primarily on projected revenue gains and immediate marketing opportunities. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because Regal Rexnord, as a publicly traded company, operates under stringent regulatory oversight, particularly concerning financial reporting and investor communications. The core challenge lies in balancing the need for timely information dissemination with the imperative of accuracy and compliance. A hasty or incomplete impact assessment can lead to misinformed decisions, potentially causing market disruption, regulatory penalties, and damage to investor confidence. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates the potential consequences of the new product launch across various business functions and external stakeholders. This includes analyzing financial implications, revenue projections, cost impacts, operational readiness, supply chain, manufacturing, distribution, marketing and sales strategies, legal and compliance considerations, regulatory approvals, intellectual property, and communication plans for investors and the public. This methodical approach ensures that all relevant factors are considered, risks are identified and mitigated, and decisions are based on a thorough understanding of the potential outcomes. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance, which mandate transparency, accuracy, and due diligence in all significant business activities, especially those impacting financial performance and public perception. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate marketing benefits overlooks the broader regulatory and financial implications. This failure to conduct a holistic impact assessment can lead to misstated financial projections, inadequate resource allocation, and potential noncompliance with disclosure requirements, all of which can attract regulatory scrutiny and penalties. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by skipping detailed risk analysis is also professionally unacceptable. This can result in unforeseen operational disruptions, unexpected costs, or legal challenges that were not adequately anticipated or planned for. Such oversights can lead to significant financial losses and reputational damage, violating the duty of care owed to shareholders and stakeholders. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or informal consultations without rigorous data collection and analysis fails to meet the standards of professional due diligence. This can result in flawed assumptions and decisions, potentially leading to significant business setbacks and regulatory noncompliance. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objective, gathering all relevant information, systematically assessing potential impacts and risks, evaluating alternative courses of action, and finally, making an informed decision supported by evidence and aligned with regulatory and ethical standards. This process emphasizes proactive risk management and robust due diligence. Question 11. The performance metrics show a significant increase in a key operational efficiency ratio for Regal Rexnord over the past quarter. However, this improvement is largely attributable to a one-time cost-saving initiative that is not expected to recur. Which approach best addresses the potential regulatory and ethical implications of communicating this metric to investors? Option A. Present the improved efficiency ratio prominently in all investor communications, highlighting the positive trend as a testament to operational excellence. Option B. Disclose the improved efficiency ratio, but provide clear and prominent context explaining the one-time nature of the cost-saving initiative and its impact on the ratio's sustainability. Option C. Focus investor communications on other, more sustainable performance indicators, and only mention the efficiency ratio in response to direct investor inquiries, without elaborating on the one-time initiative. Option D. Report the efficiency ratio as is, assuming investors will conduct their own due diligence to understand the underlying drivers of the improvement. Correct answer is A. Present the improved efficiency ratio prominently in all investor communications, highlighting the positive trend as a testament to operational excellence. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Regal Rexnord, as a publicly traded company, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight regarding its financial reporting and disclosures. The performance metrics, if not accurately and transparently communicated, could mislead investors and stakeholders, potentially leading to regulatory action, reputational damage, and loss of investor confidence. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need to present positive performance with the absolute requirement for accuracy and compliance with relevant financial regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that considers the implications of the performance metrics on various stakeholders and regulatory obligations. This approach prioritizes understanding how the metrics will be interpreted, what disclosures are required, and whether any potential misinterpretations could lead to non-compliance. Specifically, it necessitates a review against U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) regulations, such as Regulation G, non-GAAP financial measures, and other disclosure requirements under the Securities Act of 1933 and the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. This ensures that any presentation of performance is not only accurate but also compliant with the rules designed to protect investors and maintain market integrity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on highlighting positive trends without a comprehensive impact assessment risks misrepresentation. This could violate SEC rules against misleading statements and omissions, leading to enforcement actions. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of communication over accuracy could result in the dissemination of incomplete or potentially misleading information, again triggering regulatory scrutiny. Furthermore, an approach that ignores the potential for different interpretations by sophisticated and unsophisticated investors alike fails to meet the spirit of disclosure regulations, which aim for clarity and fairness for all market participants. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core objective of communicating performance metrics. This should be followed by a rigorous assessment of potential impacts, including regulatory compliance, stakeholder perception, and potential for misinterpretation. Consulting with legal and compliance departments is crucial to ensure adherence to all applicable U.S. financial regulations. The decision should always err on the side of transparency and accuracy, even if it means a less overtly positive presentation, to safeguard the company's integrity and avoid regulatory penalties. Question 12. Comparative studies suggest that employees in publicly traded companies often face ethical dilemmas regarding material non-public information. If a Regal Rexnord employee learns of a significant, undisclosed product recall that is expected to negatively impact the company's stock price, what is the most appropriate course of action to uphold ethical and regulatory standards? Option A. Report the information to Regal Rexnord's legal or compliance department for proper disclosure procedures and refrain from any personal trading. Option B. Inform a close friend who is an active investor so they can also sell their holdings before the news breaks. Option C. Immediately sell any Regal Rexnord stock owned to mitigate potential losses before the information becomes public. Option D. Wait for the information to be released publicly and then assess whether to sell any personal stock holdings. Correct answer is C. Immediately sell any Regal Rexnord stock owned to mitigate potential losses before the information becomes public. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Regal Rexnord employee because it involves navigating a potential conflict of interest and adhering to the company's ethical guidelines and relevant U.S. regulations concerning insider trading and disclosure. The employee has access to material non-public information that could significantly impact the company's stock price. The core of the challenge lies in balancing personal financial interests with the legal and ethical obligations to the company and the broader market. Careful judgment is required to avoid any actions that could be construed as unethical or illegal. The correct approach involves prioritizing the company's disclosure obligations and personal ethical conduct over immediate personal gain. This means refraining from trading on the information and instead reporting it through the appropriate internal channels for disclosure. This aligns with the principles of fair disclosure and market integrity, as mandated by U.S. securities laws, such as the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 and SEC regulations. It also upholds the fiduciary duty an employee owes to Regal Rexnord and its shareholders. An incorrect approach would be to trade on the information before it is publicly disclosed. This constitutes insider trading, a violation of U.S. securities laws and a severe ethical breach. It undermines market fairness by giving an unfair advantage to those with privileged information. Another incorrect approach would be to tip off a friend or family member about the information, enabling them to trade. This is also a form of insider trading and carries significant legal and ethical repercussions. Finally, ignoring the information and taking no action, while seemingly neutral, could be problematic if it implies a lack of diligence in upholding ethical standards or a failure to report a potential breach of company policy or regulation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature of the information, material and non-public. Next, they should assess their obligations under company policy and relevant regulations. This involves consulting internal compliance departments or legal counsel if there is any ambiguity. The framework should then guide them to prioritize ethical conduct and legal compliance, even if it means foregoing a potential personal benefit. A robust decision-making process would involve seeking guidance, documenting actions, and acting with transparency and integrity. Question 13. Stakeholder feedback indicates that while Regal Rexnord's operational efficiency has improved in certain divisions, the company's public financial outlook has not adequately reflected these improvements, leading to investor confusion. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance and ethical disclosure practices for Regal Rexnord? Option A. Delay any public acknowledgement of the operational improvements until the next scheduled quarterly earnings report to avoid creating market volatility. Option B. Advise the investor relations team to focus on positive market narratives and to deflect specific questions about the discrepancy between operational performance and financial outlook during upcoming calls. Option C. Issue a general press release highlighting the positive operational improvements without detailing their specific financial impact to manage investor sentiment. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive internal review of operational data and its impact on financial projections, and then issue a revised public statement or update to financial disclosures that accurately reflects the operational improvements and their financial implications, in consultation with legal and compliance teams. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive internal review of operational data and its impact on financial projections, and then issue a revised public statement or update to financial disclosures that accurately reflects the operational improvements and their financial implications, in consultation with legal and compliance teams. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Regal Rexnord, as a publicly traded company, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight regarding its financial reporting and disclosures. The feedback from stakeholders, particularly investors and analysts, highlights a potential disconnect between internal operational performance and the external perception shaped by financial communications. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that all public statements and disclosures are accurate, complete, and not misleading, thereby maintaining investor confidence and complying with securities laws. This requires a nuanced understanding of both the company's actual performance and the legal and ethical obligations surrounding its communication. The correct approach involves a thorough, fact-based review of the operational data and its implications for financial reporting, followed by transparent and compliant communication. This means acknowledging any discrepancies identified by stakeholders, investigating their root causes, and then communicating the findings and any necessary adjustments to financial projections or disclosures in a manner that adheres strictly to the disclosure requirements of the relevant securities regulators. This ensures that Regal Rexnord's public statements are grounded in reality and meet legal standards for accuracy and completeness, thereby upholding ethical obligations to investors and the market. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss stakeholder feedback without proper investigation. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the importance of external perspectives in assessing company performance and compliance. It also risks violating regulations that require companies to address material information and to ensure their public statements are not misleading. Another incorrect approach is to selectively disclose information or to frame the operational data in a way that downplays negative aspects while highlighting positives, without providing a balanced and comprehensive picture. This can be considered misleading and may violate securities laws that prohibit deceptive practices. It erodes trust and can lead to regulatory scrutiny and penalties. Finally, An incorrect approach would be to make public statements that are not fully supported by the internal data or to delay necessary disclosures. This can create an inaccurate market perception and may constitute a violation of disclosure obligations, particularly if material information is withheld or misrepresented. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, acknowledging and documenting all stakeholder feedback. Second, initiating an objective internal review to validate or refute the feedback using available data. Third, consulting with legal and compliance departments to understand the regulatory implications of the findings. Fourth, developing a communication strategy that is transparent, accurate, and compliant with all applicable laws and regulations. Finally, ensuring that any corrective actions or updated disclosures are implemented promptly and effectively. Question 14. Regulatory review indicates that Regal Rexnord is developing a new product line that is expected to significantly impact its market share. Before a public announcement, a senior executive is approached by a prominent financial analyst seeking an early indication of the product's potential success. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical best practices for Regal Rexnord? Option A. Provide the analyst with detailed, non-public information about the product's projected performance, emphasizing its revolutionary nature to foster positive analyst coverage. Option B. Share preliminary, unverified data with the analyst, suggesting that further internal analysis is ongoing to gauge initial market sentiment. Option C. Inform the analyst that Regal Rexnord is unable to comment on future product developments at this time and will make a public announcement when appropriate. Option D. Instruct the investor relations team to prepare a comprehensive press release that includes all material information about the new product line, to be disseminated simultaneously to all major news outlets and regulatory filings. The correct answer is A. Provide the analyst with detailed, non-public information about the product's projected performance, emphasizing its revolutionary nature to foster positive analyst coverage. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Regal Rexnord, as a publicly traded entity, must navigate complex regulatory requirements concerning financial reporting and stakeholder communication. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely and accurate disclosure with the potential for market manipulation or premature release of sensitive information. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations, particularly those governing insider trading and material non-public information. The correct approach involves a proactive and collaborative strategy that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical communication. This approach ensures that all stakeholders receive accurate information in a manner that adheres to legal frameworks, preventing potential legal repercussions and maintaining market integrity. Specifically, it involves consulting with legal and compliance departments to interpret and apply relevant regulations, such as those enforced by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, in the U.S., which govern disclosure of material information. This ensures that any communication is both timely and compliant, avoiding the pitfalls of selective disclosure or the dissemination of incomplete data. An incorrect approach that involves selectively sharing information with certain analysts before a public announcement is ethically and regulatorily unsound. This constitutes selective disclosure, a violation of Regulation FD, Fair Disclosure, in the U.S., which mandates that material non-public information be disclosed broadly to the public, not selectively to a favored few. Such an action can lead to accusations of insider trading and significant penalties for both the company and the individuals involved. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay the announcement indefinitely until all potential impacts are fully understood, is also problematic. While thoroughness is important, undue delay can also be detrimental. It can create uncertainty in the market, potentially leading to speculation and price volatility. Furthermore, if the information is material, there is a regulatory obligation to disclose it within a reasonable timeframe, as defined by SEC rules and interpretations. Failing to do so can also lead to regulatory scrutiny. Finally, an approach that involves making a vague or misleading announcement to avoid immediate scrutiny is a direct violation of securities laws. Transparency and accuracy are paramount in financial reporting. Misleading statements can erode investor confidence and result in severe penalties, including fines and legal action. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the nature of the information. Is it material? Is it non-public? 2. Consult internal legal and compliance teams. Seek expert advice on regulatory obligations and best practices. 3. Assess the timing of disclosure. Determine the appropriate window for public announcement, balancing timeliness with completeness. 4. Develop a clear and accurate communication strategy. Ensure all disclosures are made broadly and simultaneously to all stakeholders. 5. Document all decisions and communications. Maintain a clear audit trail for compliance purposes. Question 15. Consider a scenario where a Regal Rexnord employee, who is not in a senior management or financial reporting role, is considering purchasing shares in a publicly traded competitor company for their personal investment portfolio. The employee has no direct knowledge of any upcoming material events for either Regal Rexnord or the competitor. However, they are aware that Regal Rexnord is in the process of developing a new, innovative product that could significantly impact the market, though details are not public. The employee is unsure if their general awareness of this development, even without specific non-public details, might create a conflict or violate any regulations if they invest in the competitor. Option A. Delay the investment indefinitely until the new product from Regal Rexnord is publicly announced and its market impact is clear, to avoid any potential perception of impropriety. Option B. Proceed with the investment in the competitor's stock after consulting Regal Rexnord's compliance department and obtaining written pre-clearance, ensuring full disclosure of the intended transaction and any relevant personal circumstances. Option C. Invest in the competitor's stock immediately, as the employee has no direct non-public information about the competitor and their awareness of Regal Rexnord's product development is general and not specific enough to be considered material. Option D. Seek informal advice from a trusted colleague in a different department about whether the investment is permissible before making the purchase. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the investment in the competitor's stock after consulting Regal Rexnord's compliance department and obtaining written pre-clearance, ensuring full disclosure of the intended transaction and any relevant personal circumstances. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Regal Rexnord employee due to the potential conflict between personal financial interests and the company's ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that any investment decision is made without leveraging or appearing to leverage non-public information, thereby avoiding insider trading or the appearance thereof. Careful judgment is required to navigate the fine line between legitimate personal investment and prohibited conduct. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to Regal Rexnord's internal policies regarding personal investments and pre-clearance procedures, as well as relevant securities laws. This approach prioritizes transparency and compliance, ensuring that the employee's actions are beyond reproach. Specifically, the employee must disclose the intended investment to the appropriate internal compliance department and obtain written approval before executing the trade. This process allows the company to assess whether the employee possesses any material non-public information that could be improperly used, thereby safeguarding against insider trading violations. This aligns with the principles of ethical conduct and regulatory adherence expected of all employees in publicly traded companies, preventing both actual and perceived breaches of trust and law. An incorrect approach of proceeding with the investment without disclosure or pre-clearance, even if the employee genuinely believes they have no material non-public information, carries significant regulatory and ethical risks. This failure to follow established internal procedures demonstrates a disregard for corporate governance and compliance frameworks. It could be construed as an attempt to circumvent oversight, potentially leading to accusations of insider trading or a violation of company policy. Such actions undermine the integrity of the financial markets and the company's reputation. Another incorrect approach of seeking advice from a colleague who is not in a compliance role without following the official pre-clearance process is also professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the established channels designed to identify and mitigate compliance risks. Relying on informal advice does not absolve the employee of their responsibility to adhere to formal policies and regulations. It creates a risk of misinterpretation of rules or an underestimation of potential conflicts of interest. A third incorrect approach of assuming that since the stock is widely traded and the investment amount is small, pre-clearance is unnecessary, is a dangerous oversimplification. Regulatory requirements and company policies are designed to apply broadly, and the size of a transaction or the liquidity of a stock does not negate the fundamental prohibition against trading on material non-public information. This approach demonstrates a lack of diligence and an insufficient understanding of the seriousness of insider trading regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive and cautious approach. Employees should familiarize themselves with Regal Rexnord's code of conduct and insider trading policies. When in doubt about any potential investment, the default action should always be to consult the designated compliance department and follow the prescribed pre-clearance procedures. This ensures that personal financial activities are conducted ethically and in full compliance with all applicable laws and company regulations, protecting both the individual and the organization. Question 16. The audit findings indicate that certain marketing materials distributed by Regal Rexnord may not fully comply with the disclosure requirements stipulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, for public companies. Which of the following represents the most appropriate immediate course of action for the Regal Rexnord compliance team? Option A. Instruct the marketing department to revise the specific materials flagged by the audit without further investigation into the broader disclosure practices or consulting with legal counsel. Option B. Issue a company-wide memo to all employees reminding them of the importance of accurate disclosures without specifically referencing the audit findings or the SEC, assuming the issue is minor. Option C. Immediately cease distribution of all marketing materials and initiate a comprehensive review of all past and present disclosures to identify and rectify any potential misstatements or omissions, consulting with legal counsel and relevant business units to develop a remediation plan. Option D. Await further guidance from the SEC before taking any action, as the audit findings are preliminary and may not represent a definitive violation. The correct answer is C. Immediately cease distribution of all marketing materials and initiate a comprehensive review of all past and present disclosures to identify and rectify any potential misstatements or omissions, consulting with legal counsel and relevant business units to develop a remediation plan. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Regal Rexnord's internal audit has identified potential noncompliance with a critical regulatory requirement. The challenge lies in accurately interpreting the audit findings, understanding the specific regulatory obligations, and selecting the most appropriate course of action to rectify the situation while minimizing risk to the company and its stakeholders. The pressure to act swiftly and decisively, without overreacting or underestimating the severity of the findings, requires careful judgment and a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based response. This begins with a detailed review of the audit report to fully comprehend the nature and extent of the identified issues. Subsequently, it requires consulting the specific regulations cited in the audit findings to confirm the exact requirements and understand the potential consequences of noncompliance. The next crucial step is to engage with the relevant internal departments, e.g., legal, compliance, operations, to gather further information, assess the root cause of the noncompliance, and develop a remediation plan. This plan should be practical, actionable, and designed to bring Regal Rexnord into full compliance. Finally, implementing the remediation plan and establishing robust monitoring mechanisms to prevent recurrence are essential. This approach is correct because it is grounded in regulatory adherence, proactive problem-solving, and a commitment to maintaining the integrity of Regal Rexnord's operations. It directly addresses the audit findings by seeking to understand and rectify the underlying issues, thereby fulfilling the company's legal and ethical obligations. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings without proper investigation. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it demonstrates a disregard for internal controls and potential legal requirements. It could lead to continued noncompliance, escalating penalties, reputational damage, and potential legal action against the company and its management. Another incorrect approach would be to implement superficial changes without understanding the root cause of the noncompliance. This is also a regulatory and ethical failure, as it fails to address the underlying problem, making recurrence likely and demonstrating a lack of genuine commitment to compliance. Such an approach might appear to satisfy the immediate audit finding, but does not achieve sustainable compliance. A third incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the audit team's initial assessment without seeking expert internal or external advice. While audit findings are important, they may require further interpretation or validation by legal counsel or subject matter experts to ensure the correct regulatory interpretation and the most effective remediation strategy are employed. This can lead to misinterpretations of regulations and suboptimal or even counterproductive corrective actions. Professionals should approach such situations by first prioritizing a thorough understanding of the audit findings and the relevant regulatory landscape. This involves a structured process of information gathering, analysis, and consultation. They should then develop a clear, actionable plan that addresses the root causes of any identified noncompliance and ensures future adherence. Continuous monitoring and a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory integrity should guide all decisions. Question 17. The investigation demonstrates that a procurement manager at Regal Rexnord has a close personal relationship with an executive at a key supplier company. The procurement manager is responsible for evaluating bids and making recommendations for significant contracts with this supplier. The manager has not disclosed this relationship to Regal Rexnord's compliance department. Which of the following actions best upholds Regal Rexnord's ethical obligations and regulatory compliance? Option A. Inform the supplier executive about the potential conflict and ask them to withdraw their company from consideration for the current contracts. Option B. Continue to evaluate bids and make recommendations as usual, assuming the personal relationship will not influence professional judgment. Option C. Proactively disclose the personal relationship to Regal Rexnord's compliance department and seek guidance on managing potential conflicts of interest. Option D. Wait until a specific contract is awarded to the supplier before considering whether to disclose the relationship. Correct answer is B. Continue to evaluate bids and make recommendations as usual, assuming the personal relationship will not influence professional judgment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual at Regal Rexnord to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure compliance with internal policies and relevant regulations, even when faced with pressure or perceived expediency. The core of the challenge lies in upholding ethical standards and regulatory requirements over immediate personal or departmental gains. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate risks associated with undisclosed relationships that could influence business decisions. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent disclosure of the relationship to the appropriate compliance or legal department at Regal Rexnord. This aligns with standard corporate governance principles and regulatory expectations that mandate the identification and management of conflicts of interest. By disclosing, the individual initiates a formal process to assess the potential impact of the relationship on procurement decisions and to implement safeguards, such as recusal from relevant discussions or decisions, thereby ensuring fairness and integrity in business dealings. This adheres to the spirit and letter of most corporate ethics codes, and in many jurisdictions is a legal requirement to prevent corruption and ensure fair competition. An incorrect approach of proceeding without disclosure, assuming the relationship is insignificant or unlikely to influence decisions, is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a breach of trust and a violation of ethical obligations. It creates an environment where decisions could be perceived as biased, undermining the company's reputation and potentially leading to regulatory scrutiny or legal repercussions. Such an approach disregards the fundamental principle of transparency in business relationships and the importance of avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. Another incorrect approach of waiting for a specific procurement decision to be made before considering disclosure is also flawed. This delay suggests an intent to benefit from the undisclosed relationship before it is identified, which is ethically problematic and could be interpreted as an attempt to circumvent compliance procedures. It misses the opportunity for early risk assessment and mitigation, leaving the company vulnerable to potential conflicts of interest that could have been managed proactively. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Regal Rexnord's code of conduct and any applicable external regulations concerning conflicts of interest. When a potential conflict arises, the immediate step should be to identify the nature of the relationship and its potential to influence business decisions. This should be followed by a prompt and transparent disclosure to the designated compliance officer or legal counsel. The individual should then cooperate fully with any review process and adhere to the prescribed mitigation strategies, which may include recusal from decision-making processes. This systematic approach ensures that ethical standards are maintained and regulatory obligations are met, safeguarding both the individual's professional integrity and the company's reputation. Question 18. The analysis reveals that a new manufacturing process being considered by Regal Rexnord may have a minor but measurable impact on local water quality. As a compliance officer, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure adherence to U.S. environmental regulations and ethical stakeholder management? Option A. Downplay the potential water quality impact in internal reports to avoid delaying the project and to present a more favorable outlook. Option B. Immediately report the potential impact to the relevant U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and inform senior management of the findings and proposed mitigation strategies. Option C. Proceed with the new manufacturing process as planned, assuming the impact is negligible and unlikely to trigger regulatory scrutiny. Option D. Conduct a more extensive, costly study to definitively quantify the impact before taking any action, even if it significantly delays the project timeline. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the potential impact to the relevant U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and inform senior management of the findings and proposed mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Regal Rexnord employee because it requires balancing the company's financial interests with the ethical obligations to stakeholders, particularly in the context of potential environmental impact. The employee must navigate the complexities of regulatory compliance and corporate social responsibility without resorting to misleading practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions are transparent, accurate, and aligned with both legal requirements and ethical standards. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and disclosing potential environmental risks associated with the new manufacturing process to relevant internal stakeholders and regulatory bodies, as required by applicable U.S. environmental laws and regulations. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes transparency and compliance. By informing stakeholders and regulators early, the employee upholds the company's commitment to responsible operations and avoids potential future penalties or reputational damage. This aligns with the principles of environmental stewardship and corporate accountability mandated by U.S. environmental statutes. An incorrect approach that involves downplaying or omitting the identified environmental risks is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a violation of regulatory disclosure requirements under U.S. environmental law, such as the Clean Air Act or Clean Water Act, which mandate reporting of potential pollutants or hazardous substances. Ethically, it breaches the duty of candor and honesty owed to stakeholders and regulatory agencies, potentially leading to significant fines, legal action, and severe damage to Regal Rexnord's reputation. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the new process without any further investigation or disclosure, is also professionally flawed. This demonstrates a disregard for potential environmental consequences and a failure to adhere to due diligence principles. It ignores the proactive stance required by environmental regulations and ethical business practices, leaving Regal Rexnord vulnerable to unforeseen liabilities and public scrutiny. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of potential risks and regulatory obligations. This includes 1. Thoroughly understanding all applicable U.S. environmental laws and regulations relevant to the manufacturing process. 2. Identifying and assessing any potential environmental impacts, however minor they may seem initially. 3. Consulting with legal and environmental compliance departments within Regal Rexnord to ensure accurate interpretation of regulations and best practices. 4. Proactively communicating findings and proposed mitigation strategies to relevant internal stakeholders and, if necessary, external regulatory bodies. 5. Documenting all assessments, communications, and decisions to ensure accountability and transparency. Question 19. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the internal audit team at Regal Rexnord needs to evaluate the effectiveness of the company's Foreign Corrupt Practices Act (FCPA) compliance program. Which of the following approaches would best satisfy this objective? Option A. Relying primarily on management's self-assessment reports regarding the FCPA compliance program's effectiveness without conducting independent verification. Option B. Reviewing documented FCPA policies, procedures, and training materials, and then performing targeted testing of transactional data and conducting interviews with key personnel to assess practical implementation and adherence. Option C. Examining only the FCPA policies and procedures manuals to confirm their existence and general content. Option D. Conducting a high-level review of a small, non-representative sample of international transactions to identify any obvious red flags. The correct answer is B. Reviewing documented FCPA policies, procedures, and training materials, and then performing targeted testing of transactional data and conducting interviews with key personnel to assess practical implementation and adherence. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Regal Rexnord's internal audit team is tasked with evaluating the effectiveness of the company's compliance program, specifically concerning the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA. The challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough investigation with the potential for disruption to ongoing business operations and the sensitivity of information being reviewed. A robust compliance program requires not only documented policies, but also evidence of their practical implementation and enforcement. The audit team must assess whether the controls designed to prevent and detect bribery and corruption are functioning as intended. The correct approach involves a systematic review of documented policies, procedures, and training materials related to anti-bribery and corruption, followed by targeted testing of transactional data and interviews with key personnel. This approach ensures that the audit provides a comprehensive and evidence-based assessment of Regal Rexnord's FCPA compliance. Specifically, it aligns with best practices in internal auditing and regulatory expectations for assessing compliance programs. The FCPA itself, along with guidance from the Department of Justice and Securities and Exchange Commission, emphasizes the importance of a well-designed and effectively implemented compliance program. This approach directly addresses the core components of such a program, including due diligence, internal controls, and training, providing a factual basis for the audit findings. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reviewing documented policies without testing their practical application would fail to identify potential gaps or weaknesses in actual implementation. This overlooks the reality that even well-written policies can be circumvented or ignored in practice, leading to regulatory violations. Such an approach would not satisfy the requirement for a robust assessment of the program's effectiveness. Another incorrect approach that relies exclusively on management's self-assessment without independent verification would be insufficient. While management's perspective is valuable, it is susceptible to bias and may not uncover all areas of concern. Regulatory bodies expect independent assurance that compliance measures are truly effective. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness, perhaps by only reviewing a small, non-representative sample of transactions, would risk missing critical red flags. The FCPA requires a diligent and comprehensive effort to prevent and detect violations. A superficial review would not meet this standard and could lead to an inaccurate assessment of Regal Rexnord's compliance posture. Professionals should employ a risk-based approach to internal audits of compliance programs. This involves identifying the highest risk areas based on the company's operations, industry, and geographic footprint. The audit plan should then be designed to gather sufficient, reliable, and relevant evidence to support conclusions about the effectiveness of controls in those high-risk areas. This includes a combination of documentation review, data analytics, and interviews, all conducted with professional skepticism and a commitment to uncovering the truth. Question 20. To address the challenge of ensuring robust financial reporting and operational integrity at Regal Rexnord, which of the following approaches to risk assessment is most aligned with regulatory expectations and professional best practices? Option A. Implementing a comprehensive risk assessment framework that systematically identifies, evaluates, and mitigates potential risks across all business functions, with a specific focus on areas impacting financial reporting and compliance. Option B. Focusing risk assessment primarily on operational efficiency improvements, with financial reporting risks being addressed only as a secondary consideration. Option C. Prioritizing risk assessment efforts solely on those risks that present the most immediate and quantifiable financial threats, deferring less tangible or longer-term risks. Option D. Conducting risk assessments only in response to identified compliance failures or negative financial events, rather than as a proactive measure. The correct answer is A. Implementing a comprehensive risk assessment framework that systematically identifies, evaluates, and mitigates potential risks across all business functions, with a specific focus on areas impacting financial reporting and compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Regal Rexnord, as a publicly traded company, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight regarding its financial reporting and risk management practices. The challenge lies in identifying and evaluating potential risks that could impact the company's financial health and operational integrity, ensuring compliance with relevant regulations, and making informed decisions to mitigate these risks. A failure to adequately assess and manage these risks can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of investor confidence. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive risk assessment process that integrates regulatory compliance, ethical considerations, and strategic business objectives. This approach prioritizes identifying potential risks across various operational, financial, and compliance domains, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and developing appropriate mitigation strategies. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory expectations, such as those found in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act (SOX) in the United States, which mandates internal controls over financial reporting and risk assessment. By systematically identifying and addressing risks, Regal Rexnord can enhance its resilience, protect shareholder value, and maintain its commitment to ethical business conduct. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate financial gains without considering the underlying risks would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct a thorough risk assessment could lead to unforeseen liabilities and noncompliance with regulations, potentially resulting in fines and legal action. Another incorrect approach that neglects the potential impact of operational disruptions on financial reporting would also be professionally unsound. This oversight could leave Regal Rexnord vulnerable to significant financial losses and reporting inaccuracies if critical operations are compromised, violating the spirit and letter of regulations requiring accurate and reliable financial statements. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes cost-cutting over robust risk management frameworks would be detrimental. While efficiency is important, compromising essential risk assessment processes to save money can create a false sense of security and expose the company to greater financial and reputational damage in the long run, contravening the duty of care owed to stakeholders and regulatory bodies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape applicable to Regal Rexnord. This involves identifying key risks, assessing their potential impact on financial performance and compliance, and then evaluating mitigation strategies based on their effectiveness, cost-benefit analysis, and alignment with ethical principles and regulatory requirements. This structured approach ensures that decisions are not only financially sound, but also compliant and ethically responsible.